Oh, did you think I was left bouncing off the walls after the last episode of Star Trek Discovery? Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on Season 2, Episode 8 of Star Trek Discovery, entitled If Memory Serves. And this was, in a word, spectacular. I might as well be the boy in the plastic bubble with how much I'm bouncing off the walls after watching this episode because, frankly, I rent and I don't need my apartment walls to be destroyed. If you call back to the 4th season of Star Trek Enterprise, that is the season most people, even the show's detractors back in the day, had to give up props and with the, taking control of Manny Koto as the, head writer of the series. They had tied a lot more back to established lore within Star Trek. Going back to the original series, things like having the Tellarites and the Andorians and the Vulcans all together at the table, brokeraging, forming a union of planets and everything like that, and the whole Klingon augment virus, calling back to, in a sense, Wrath of Khan, only as a precursor, having the sort of great grandfather of Data involved, and all this kind of stuff. Vulcan's Forge and the taking over of, or rather reclaiming Vulcan for, the actual established Vulcan hierarchy, taking it back out of the hands of Romulan sympathizers. It was spectacular. Even as, I myself, who is somebody who loves Star Trek Enterprise, all 4 seasons of that particular show, even I have to give credit where it's due and say I was the most excited with all of those lines that were tying back to TOS. All of that is what is effectively happening, unfolding before our eyes in this single episode of Star Trek Discovery. The previous episode was spectacular. I was bouncing off the walls after I watched that one as well, especially bringing about, the fact that we're going back to Talos 4. And they hand deliver us there in this episode, but not before a literal tying back to TOS with the sort of previously on precursor, before the episode proper starts. And it's all footage from the cage. It's taking us literally back there, and it was mind-blowing to me. Of course, you have to fully embrace the rest of everything that happens in Discovery from then on as being a visual reboot, but for all intents and purposes, it's within that same timeline, seemingly. Because where the cage left off is where we're picking up, very literally, and all of the ins and outs of the characterization of Pike, of the return of Vina, of the return of the Telosians, of the return of Spock, and how, there was that divide that was born between Spock and his sister Michael. It was all mind-blowing. It was literally mind-blowing. And that's all just the one half of the episode. Much as I said, and I summarized the previous episode was kind of 2 halves, focusing back and forth between what's going on with Discovery, what's going on with Michael and Spock and all that kind of stuff, and Sarek and Amanda. This episode, very similarly, was cut from similar cloth, plotted out the same way. We were focusing on Michael going to Talos 4 with Spock, and learning that, this was due to Spock's own orchestration. He knew he needed some sort of mental telepathy on par with what the Telosians were capable of to unravel that and make sense of that, because logic, as he says, failed him. Emotions, as he says, failed him. Family failed him. He didn't know where else to go, where else to turn. And it's kind of an irony that he turns to somebody who spurned him in such a gross fashion, calling him like a garbage half-breed. It kind of adds context now whenever he has been referred to in Star Trek, the original series. There's a couple of episodes where they referred to him as a half-breed. There's the one episode, which the name escapes me, but it'll be down here on the bottom, where basically there was the planet that they went to, and these flowers were not hallucinogenic, but definitely mood manipulative, and Spock didn't ever want to leave, and everyone who was getting doused with it on board the Enterprise decided they were going to, make a new life on this planet. They were all under the mental control of this plant for all intents and purposes. And it took Kirk sort of schmaltzing and schmoozing Spock to get him back on board the Enterprise. And one of the things he said to him to make him flip out, because if you had a sudden surge of emotions, especially rage, anger, it was something that would snap Spock back, and Kirk called him a half-breed, among other things. You know, I think at one point maybe McCoy even referred to him as that in an episode. You pointy-eared hobgoblin and things of that sort. And so to have, you know, Spock needing so much to be brought to Talos, knowing this was his only vestige of hope, in parsing through all of this crazy stuff that was revealed to him, to make sense of it, to be able to come back from it, in order to let Pike know, let Burnham know, this is the fate of our timeline. This is our potential future. We have to change things. The cause and effect of the unfolding of time be damned, because if it just steers that course without any manipulation from our own hands, it's already being manipulated from the outside, from some unseen, unknown force, and our destruction, the destruction of many worlds, is what is hanging in the balance. And again, mind-blowing. I mean, mind-blowing that much more because you know through the entire episode when they're talking about sabotage having been unfolding on board the Discovery, and they think it's Ash Tyler. No, it's Arium through the influence of whatever that mechanism was that like beamed those 3 red dots into her eyes, and that is confirmed by the end, even though you know it the whole, you know, stretch of the episode, but it's confirmed by the end because they zoom in and you see her eyes, and there are the little, you know, 3 sort of brainiac glowing red orbs in her eyes. So obviously she is the threat, and especially if you look at the trailer for the next episode, we know that's going to come to a head. And lives are going to be threatened at the hands of Arium under this control, whatever it is. Just, oh my God, just a spectacular episode. The 3 Telosians, I didn't know if there were going to be 3. We only saw 2 in the trailer for this episode attached to the previous, but there were the 3, and it was kind of amazing to me because, of course, they were redesigned, and I could take or leave it a little bit when I first saw it. I'm definitely warming to it now after having watched the entire episode, but I gotta say, the 3rd Telosian that was standing behind the main 2 that were actually vocal in this episode looked the most like the 3rd Telosian, you know, the silent Telosian, in the original series episode The Cage, as well as the Menagerie, which repurposed the Cage footage. And I love this as a stepping stone. I love this, how it was a through line through the episode that brought everything back around, brought all the characters back together. While Pike is dealing with Ash Tyler and dealing with Section 31, and we're, you know, focusing on Dr. Culber's trying to make sense of whatever he's experiencing, and how there is a fallout that is burgeoning and ends up coming to a head in the episode between he and his former lover Stamets. Stamets was one minor point of contention for me because he was really in denial. He's been in denial ever since Culber returned, for all intents and purposes, and was getting a little pedantic. It was getting a little annoying, like Tilly level annoying, when she was written the worst. You know, she's so far this season has been her best turn of character as far as I'm concerned. But Stamets has now sort of taken that torch out of her hands, just being sort of a goon and goofy and really just trying to, you know, like smooth things over with his former lover Culber, and it's not gonna fly. It's not flying at all. It's just crashing into the wall again and again, and it's borderline like nauseating. And I love how that finally comes to a head where Culber, you know, he gets fleeting glimpses of Ash Tyler. He's got to have a confrontation. You know, it's angling that way. And I put 2 and 2 together with the fight scene we saw in the preview for this episode attached to the previous, that was where it was probably going to culminate. And I loved how it came to a head. I loved that sort of fisticuffs battle between them, you know, sizing each other up. Culber gets right at Ash Tyler's face, and it's just, it was like, it was shades of TOS in a way, with all the fights that, you know, would unfold in certain episodes of TOS. But at the same time, you know, it's colored by Stamets watching this unfold, and the whole crew watching it unfold, as reined in by, of all people, Saru, you know, who, as Pike points out, he's gone through an evolutionary stage of his own to the point where now he's more aggressive, he's more of a predator, he's not so becoming to fear anymore, and so he's just like, gotta let it play out, man. You know, it's gonna be better for everyone, it's gonna be cathartic in the end for everyone involved. And Pike's just kind of like, do you think if you had been your old self you would have had the same thought? And Saru's just kind of like, Who knows? Maybe not. I don't know. But that's the way it is. That's the way the cookie crumbles, Captain Sir. You know, and I love the aspect of decorum that Pike brings back into, you know, command of the situation. He's like, no more. We can't have any more of this. Don't let this happen again. Especially you, Saru. Don't let this happen again. Let everyone know who was there. We're not going to tolerate this anymore. And so, as I say, everything gets brought to a head where of course, you have Burnham and Spock being very much in danger of being sought out by Section 31. Everyone on Discovery, knowing this and trying to beat Section 31 to the punch. Whatever is going on with the sabotage, they don't know, but we know it's Arium and everything like that. And it's all a matter of time. Time is a thorough crunch, and, you know, who's going to get there first kind of thing. And so finally we have this just reunification that was amazing. Was absolutely pitch perfect. Melissa George, who played Vina, by the way, was phenomenal. She is the spitting image in her line delivery, in her mannerisms of Susan Oliver, who played the original Vina in The Cage pilot. And I had no trouble, you know, parsing that for myself, accepting her as this character. Similarly with the Telosians, while the voices were a little different, you know, you definitely get much more of a masculine personification of sort of the lead Telosian, whereas in the original pilot, they were all played by, you know, women. Of course, there was voice modulation involved and everything like that. So it was just a little bit sort of hard to wrap my mind around how different they sounded and a little bit how different they looked. But with that reunification that comes and how that is the olive branch effectively to getting Burnham and Spock back aboard Discovery and sort of faking out, you know, the Section 31 ship, Captain Leland and everything like that. You even hear the transporter sound effect from the original Cage, and I knew it was an illusion. Right then and there, I'm like, haha, they got you. I started chuckling. I laughed out loud in spite of myself because I knew that's what had happened, what had transpired. And it was just kind of amazeballs in the end, how it had sort of this amazing tie to aspects of Star Trek where sometimes you have to break the rules for the greater good. And now, for all intents and purposes, the entire crew of the Discovery, especially Spock and Burnham and Pike now, are kind of sort of wanted. You know, they're kind of fugitives. And so that's going to be really interesting that they're meant to be on the run. But then at the same time, on the same token, according to the trailer for the next episode, they're going right to the Section 31 hub for some reason. Okay, I don't know where they pulled that out of their hats, but it was amazing. It was spectacular. Blew my ever-loving mind, especially as someone, as I said in my previous episode discussion video, especially as somebody who has always held up in the highest regard the Cage menagerie sort of time frame of the original series of Star Trek. I love the original series of Star Trek. It is my all-time favorite Star Trek. Enterprise being a close second, and then I can sort of go back and forth between DS9 and TNG as far as a third, and Voyager, you know, toward the end or whatever like that. Discovery is definitely elevating on that list. It's kind of starting to teeter-totter between the third and fourth spot, especially with all of the ties to the lore, all of the ties to that time period, which was the Star Trek that might have been, and unfortunately never came about. But at the same time, fortunately, because if it had, we wouldn't have had Kirk and McCoy and Scotty and Uhura and Sulu and Chekhov and all that good stuff. But it's mind-blowing. This is a time period in Trek that blows my mind, that I am the most captivated by and the most sort of magnetized toward. And it was on thorough display in this episode in all the best ways possible. And apart from Stamets's, you know, sort of being in denial and walking around like a goof, like an oaf, you know, clumsily trying to make this coming back to whatever life he once had for his lover Culber, you know, that's like just a minor sort of complaint. And it's the only one that I have, all told, from watching this episode. This is everything I could have ever wanted it to be, and I would never have imagined going into it would be this pitch perfect. All of the casting, all of the portrayal, all of the characterization was just amazing. And I love how, you know, that whole dynamic as we saw revealed between Michael Burnham and Spock, how it kind of answers in the face of all of the detractors who have just sat back and said, oh, they made Spock a deranged psycho killer. They killed the franchise. You haven't watched the show. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Oh, there could never have been a sister in Spock's life because we never learned of her until now, just like we never learned about Sybok until he was revealed in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Funny that. But now you have a thorough reasoning as to why, because she spurned him to save his own life, and he led every other day after that time believing he had no sibling. What's he gonna do? Sit down and reveal that to Kirk 10 years later? Be like, I had a sister once and she was a bitch. Everyone hated her on your Terran homeworld, called her a Mary Sue and all this kind of stuff. It's funny how she's supposed to be a Mary Sue, yet she's so imperfect and so in need of lessons learned and having so many trappings and failings that keep blowing up in her face, and finally she's finding her way, but yet people still bitch and moan. Well, whatever. As far as I'm concerned, anyone who says that this episode wasn't, in some estimation, good, if not perfect, is either a hypocrite, lying out both sides of their mouths, or out of their ever-loving minds. Because, in my humble opinion, this was pitch perfect. It's everything anyone who claims they were a Trekkie, especially a lover of the original series, could ever have wanted. And they delivered and then some, as far as I'm concerned. And so, with that being said, at this juncture, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below. Love it or hate it, anything goes, of course. If you've seen this particular episode of Star Trek Discovery Season 2, if memory serves, what you thought of it. Be respectable in sharing your own opinion and be respectful of others is all I really ask. And if you enjoyed this video and would like to consider supporting my channel, please have a look at my PayPal support link posted both in the description as well as the comments below, which affords you opportunities very much akin to Patreon, where you can set up a monthly contribution, a one-time only kind of thing, send me a personal message alongside any contribution you see fit to send, and request topics I may discuss in the future, ask for shout-outs, make recommendations of things I may check out, and shout you out down the line if I end up discussing, and all that good stuff. That would be 2 thumbs up for me. Anything you saw fit to send my way and would secure my longevity on YouTube for the foreseeable future. And so yeah, until the next one, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and goodbye, Spock.